welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, as per usual, a big thank you to everyone that watched last week's episode of the show and commented. Lots of nice comments, and I think it seemed to go down pretty well. I think the guys at Bimber they certainly didn't say anything nasty about it, so I'm guessing they liked what I had to say. Before we kick off with today's episode of the show, just a quick apology if I sound a little bit croaky. That's because I'm at the tail end of a rather heavy cold, thankfully I seem to have got my taste buds and my sense of smell back, which it's a bit scary when you lose it, considering, you know, when your job depends upon on that kind of thing. It's it's kind of like, well, I imagine like losing a hand or something. Well, maybe not quite so dramatic, but you kind of get what I'm saying. So anyway, this week's episode of the show is sort of kind of follows on from last week's episode of the show, in respect that the samples I have here in front of me, which were kindly sent by A.D Rattray, are part of a little tasting set. Now, you may well remember, or you may well know, that they carried out some experimentations called the Octave project, which was basically to see how much influence these Octave casks, these small 50-litre casks, have on the whiskey. And I mean, they're not used that often. I mean, I know that one of the other bottling companies, Duncan Taylor, have a range called the Octave range, which they use the Octaves for finishing in, but they don't. I mean, the quart casks are quite commonly used. I mean, I think when they are tended to be used by distilleries and bottlers, they tend to be sort of vatted kind of back in, because they obviously, by their very nature being very small, you're going to get a lot of wood contact with the spirit. Now, when they're obviously vatted back in with other things, you know, that obviously mitigates some of that intensity of wood character, and you never really kind of know just how much wood character does an Octave cask impart. Now you can, because you can buy the little sets, which is really cool. I don't have any of them left now. I did have some in stock before Christmas, but I've pretty much sold them all now, and because, you know, you just don't get this opportunity. So what you have here is you have the original bottling from the original American oak cask. Don't know whether it's a hoggy or a barrel, and then you have obviously a miniature from each of the different 4 Octave casks that A.D Rattray have created, and I'm assuming they had them created, and I'm guessing that they were probably seasoned. So I'm imagining, I mean, again, you know, I don't know for definite. I didn't ask that many questions in actual fact, which I probably should have done, but I'm assuming that these were created, the casks were created at the Speyside Cooperage or wherever, and then A.D Rattray probably seasoned them with what they used to season them with. I will get onto that in due course. Yeah, they did release them as 70cl bottlings, but then, like I said, nicely, excuse me, released them as a little miniature set, so you could actually sort of see the influence and how quickly the influence, the casks influence the spirit, because each of the 4 Octave bottlings only spent 5 months in the cask, and as you can see, picked up quite a fair amount of colour as well. So anyway, so that's today's episode of the show. I mean, oh God, I always love doing this kind of stuff. It has to be said, it's really intriguing. And yeah, let's just take a look at the range. Okay, so now A.D Rattray did 3 of these different tasting sets. So they did a Bunnahabhain, an Arran, and a Pulteney, and it's the Pulteney that I'm looking at today. So the initial bourbon cask, hoggy barrel, don't know what, was numbered 700-748, and when they bottled the miniature, this particular miniature at 58.9, it was 9 years old. By the time 5 months had elapsed in the Octave casks, the juice was now officially 10. Wow, that's really cool. Now, one of the really intriguing things is to sort of look at the ABV of each of the 4 Octave bottlings and how much they lost. So the initial cask was 58.9%. The rum Octave, after 5 months, had dropped to 55.8. Now, that's a hell of a drop for 5 months, you know. I mean, you know, again, is this sort of another side effect of aging in smaller casks, that you get a quicker either evaporation or a quicker loss of alcohol? Again, that is something it could possibly be, and if that loss of alcohol is accelerated, then obviously you're not going to want to keep your spirit in the Octave for too long at all. So this is a rum Octave finish. That's the first one. The next one we'll be looking at is the Ryoka Octave finish. Now, with this particular one, not quite so dramatic fall off. It was bottled at 57.1, so not quite so much of a big fall off in the ABV. Then we have the 2 sherry ones. Oh joy! Yes. So this is the Oloroso Octave, which was bottled at 56, and the final one, which is the PX Octave, which was bottled at 57.5. So now I'm quite surprised that the rum Octave has lost quite so much. All the others seem to have lost around about 1.5%, something like that. But you know, the rum Octave, you know, losing sort of like over 3% in 5 months. I mean, maybe that was the oak that was used. I don't know. Like I said, whether the sherry ones are ex-European oak, or whether the rum is ex-European oak or ex-American oak. Anyway, so I think this is going to be a really intriguing tasting, and we'll kick off with the starter, the American oak aged Pulteney. Okay, so as we said, let's start off with the mother cask, shall we say? Crisp, citric. Lemon, barley, pear drops, touch of tangerine, little coastal note, touch of oak, quite tight, quite not overly austere, but has that sort of austerity kind of character. It's taking a little bit of time for the oak to kind of come through, but I'm getting a little bit of creaminess as an almost kind of cedary sort of note. I mean, that's a lovely cask. That's a lovely cask of Pulteney, it has to be said, just to start off with. So, I mean, I'd have been more than happy if they'd have just bottled this. And again, it just goes to show that certain distilleries, like Pulteney, Glencadam, for example, get away with being bottled quite young. Lovely, fruity and style of spirit, and yeah, no real sort of off the still notes or anything like that. It's actually really quite pleasant. Let's see what that's like. That's got a chewy, it's a lovely aftertaste. Tangerine, pear, apricot, sort of white fruit, sort of almost Alsatian white fruit on the finish. It's a bit more denser on the palate. It kind of kicks off with a little bit more oak, a little bit more honey, some lovely barley, some salt, some citrus, but oh god, that aftertaste is absolutely gorgeous. Again, not overly oaky, emphasis more on the spirit. The oak is kind of held in check a little bit by the citrus notes and obviously by the alcohol. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it, as I managed to save some, and just sort of see what that does to it. Less exuberant now, it's a bit more oilier, it's a bit, you can argue it's a little bit more rounder, there's probably a little bit more oak vanillins. Yeah, the citrus has kind of dropped off a bit, as has the sort of the coastal character. And I was expecting the oak to maybe come up a little bit more, but the oak certainly doesn't seem to be sort of wanting to come out and play. So you are getting a little bit more youthful, oilier spirit character. Let's see what the pass like now. Very much like the nose in actual fact. Again, oilier, less citric, less coastal. There's a bit more of a almost kind of Mari type note there right on the finish, which is sort of saying, you know, this is a young spirit, and it is less exuberantly fruity. So, you know, although as far as I'm aware, this particular bottling wasn't actually bottled. The mother cask was not actually bottled in 70 CLs, but then that's not the point. The whole object of the exercise was the Octave project, to see what influence the Octave has on the cask. And so I think the only way you'd actually get to taste the mother barrel is to basically buy the miniature set. Okay, so let's move on to the Octave, the rum Octave. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? As you would expect, a lot of rummy character. Lots of dried fruit, lime. But in saying that, I am getting some barley notes. I'm getting some honey, toffeed American oak, a little bit of spice. Yeah, okay, that's not too badly balanced actually. Yes, the rum cask is very noticeable, but I don't think it kind of overpowers the Pulteney. The Pulteney does seem to sort of, you know, be there still. It's not like kind of it's completely wiped out by the rum, and maybe a little bit more herbal. There's maybe a slight confected, sugary note right just coming out now. A little bit of almost petrol as well. Now I think that's actually really quite an interesting note. I think that's worked amazingly well. And I often find that sort of like rum cask finishes do seem to be actually, even when we're talking about sort of normal sized casks, yeah, they tend to work quite nicely. Let's see what the pass like. Again, quite rummy, but still getting some barley, lovely citric character coming through on the finish, a little bit of salt. Certainly the rum kicks off the proceedings, but the spirit certainly comes through towards the end of the palate. And so some honey, some salt. You know, I think that's really, really nicely balanced. It drinks really well at this ABV. There's a little bit of an alcohol prickle, but that kind of just adds a sort of, kind of emphasises the spices right on the finish. Quite herbal, almost sort of agricole-y, you know, in character, not totally sort of in that that kind of ballpark, but there's a sort of an element of that. And I really like that. I think the balance is absolutely fabulous. Yes, maybe a little heavy on the rum, but then, like I said, this is an octave cask, and I wouldn't want to leave it much longer than 5 months, to be honest with you. Let's see what water does to it, or a drop of water. It's a little homogeneous, shall we say. It's kind of all sort of softened out, shall we say, and you know, again, possibly a little bit more spirit character, a little bit more citrus, a little bit more salt. It's a bit, like I said, it's a bit simplistic now once you put a little bit of water with it. It kind of lacks a bit of light and shade, but yeah, a bit more toasty oak notes now. So that's like. A little spicier possibly, but again, it feels simpler. It's all very harmonious, but it's all, I've kind of lost some of the complexity once the alcohol has dropped off a bit. I don't think it really needed water. You could have quite happily drunk that without it, because I just love the fact that little spicy nibble on the finish when it was neat. With water, it just lacks that sort of little bit of intensity. But overall, yeah, that's pretty damn good. So right, okay, so let's move on to the Ryoka Octave then. I would have expected it to actually be maybe a little redder in colour, but anyway, let's see what those is. Yeah, there's a lot of red fruit, spicy red fruit, a little perfumed fruitiness, mocha, tar. Oh, that's intense. I mean, that is just like, God, that's like sticking your nose straight into the cask. I mean, quite woody, herbally, spicy. I'm not getting any spirit character whatsoever. This is really full on Ryoka cask, or should we say, if I didn't know it was a Ryoka cask, I would have said full on wine cask, because you know that is what it's all about. It's very dominant. And I suppose, not surprised, you know, 5 months in sort of this sort of wine treated cask. Yeah, that's very winey, and I wouldn't say it's unbalanced, but you know, it's certainly sort of more in the wine spectrum than it is in the Pulteney spectrum, shall we say. That's what the palate's like. Oh, that's got some tight tannins. I'm guessing that this has actually been made from European oak. It certainly tastes like that. Probably A.D Rattray probably going to go, no, it's actually American oak. But my God, that is tight. The tannins are really tight. I'm getting lots of spicy red fruit, a touch of tar, licorice, a little bit of coffee, a little bit of bitter tannins. I mean, it is intense. I mean, it has to be said. I mean, you know, there is no doubt that this has obviously been finished in a wine cask. I'm not getting any sort of hints from the Pulteney spirit. I'm not getting any honey. I'm not getting any white fruit. I'm not getting any citrus. There's a bit of saltiness right on the very end of the finish, but that's pretty much about it. Let's see if a little drop of water will bring out some of the spirit character. Well, that's quite interesting, because yes, it has brought out a touch of barley, but it's made it feel a bit darker. It's a bit sort of chocolatier, and there's some almost kind of rye bread notes, which is sort of like throwing a bit of a bit of a curveball. It has to be said. I mean, I wouldn't have expected that kind of character unless that is the sort of the herbal, winey character, which is kind of giving that sort of rye-like influence. Because, like I said, when I nosed this neat, it certainly seemed to say to me European oak as opposed to American oak. So I'm guessing that although the herbalness is a bit rye-like, it's not, because it was once an American oak cask. Anyway, let's see what passes on now. Still quite winey, probably a little bit more purer red fruit notes now, a little bit of spice. Again, no character from the distillery whatsoever has managed to come through on this one, so you've got to love the winey intensity, but at the end of the day, if you'd have bought an entire bottle of this, you'd be going, well, I don't know what distillery that comes from, and herein lies the sort of the rub. And I'm getting the impression that, you know, that once we start to get into the sherry octaves, then we're going to be in the same kind of position where we're talking about the wood rather than the balance of wood and spirit as we did with the rum. So again, it's all dependent upon whether you kind of like that or not, and whether sort of, you know, that's your kind of your thing, as they say. So yeah, still really good quality, and like I said, just really interesting to sort of like you know, see it. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Oloroso Octave. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now, again, I think this is European oak. It certainly has that tightness to it. And I'm getting a lot of oak. I'm not getting quite so much sherry. I was expecting loads of dried fruit, loads of prune, yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there is a bit of citrus. There is a bit of sort of dried citrus fruit. There is a bit of, you know, raisinated fruit. But I tell you what, I'm just getting oak. You know, again, I'm getting really tight grained European spicy oak. A little bit of pepper, a little bit of a herbal note as well, burnt toast, tea leaves. I mean, that is scarleaf possibly as well. I mean, like I said, it's like, Jesus, I can almost smell those tannins. You know, they are just really gritty and really intense. And you know, again, I'm not getting, well, there's no distillery character there whatsoever, you know, not a hope in hell of any distillery character, but you know, I mean, that is just real intense oak, you know. So pass on. Excuse me. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Right. Okay. So more Oloroso on the palate. Still really tight, really spicy, really intense. Mocha, licorice, dark coffee. I mean, again, like I said, tight, grippy European tannins, and again, it's all about the oak and less about the actual sherry, and I'm quite surprised at that, to be honest with you. I was expecting a lot more sort of the sherry dried fruit and that kind of thing. And it just goes to show that sort of aging in these small little barrels really does pull out the oak character. We're not just talking about what was originally in there, we're talking about, you know, the tannins and all the other sort of oak lactones and all that kind of stuff. So let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Again, it's made it a little bit homogeneous. It's a little bit confected. It's quite sweet. Dried fruit, crystallized sort of orange. It's okay. Let's see what the pal's like. I'm actually getting a bit of spirit character, a little bit of saltiness, freshness, citric notes, a little bit of honey as well. The oak is kind of like all kind of sitting back. It's still got a little bit of a grittiness, a bit of a tightness to it. You know, I mean, that's not too bad at all on the palate. The nose was a bit boring, it has to be said. It had all gone a bit kind of like homogeneous and sort of like, now I don't know what A.D Rattray was selling the 70cl bottles for. Hopefully there wasn't too much. Yeah, I don't mind that. I think the palate was a little bit, yeah, opened up a little bit with water. Yeah, so again, really quite interesting. Okay, so let's move on to the final bottle of the day. This is the Pedro Ximinez Octave. Let's see what notes give us on this then, shall we? Big, winey, PX, pruny, herbally kind of fruit. Now, this is what I expected, you know. I expected the Oloroso bottling to be more Oloroso-y, where it wasn't in actual fact. It was more about the oak, whereas the PX one is more about the PX. It's more about the sort of the treacly sort of pruny fruit. Yes, there's some toasty oak behind it, some grippy tannins. Again, it smells like it's European oak as opposed to American oak. But yeah, I mean, this is leaving you in absolutely no doubt that this is a PX cask. It has it absolutely stamped all over it, and yep, there is, as you would expect, absolutely zero distillery character whatsoever, and it just goes to show how intense PX casks are. You know, so it passes like. Feel the moisture being sucked out of my mouth then. No, it's not quite that bad. Yeah, right, it's like the nose. It's pruny, it's winey, it's treacly, it's PX, it's sherry, it's big. It's very soft. It's actually got a little bit of a spicy kick at the finish. It's got some nice dark chocolatey moments, but you know, again, there's no light and shade. It's all, you know, I am PX oak, you know, and fine. You like that kind of stuff, then I've got no issue with that. To me, you know, there is no balance between the oak and the spirit, and I was never going to expect it, to be bluntly honest with you. And it just goes to show you that even at such a small length of time, as in 5 months, in these casks, just imparts so much wood character. But like I said, you know, in this instance, we're not talking about quite so much wood character as the PX character. It's again like the Oloroso. It's become quite homogenous, and yeah, there's it's PX sherry at the end of the day. See what the palate like. Very much the same as the palate, except a little bit softer, a little less spicy, a little less peppery as well. So yeah, as expected, to be honest with you. But you know, if big sherry really floats your boat, then you know you would have died for this kind of stuff. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Firstly, a big thank you to A.D Rattray for the samples for today's episode of the show. The support that you kindly give is good. It's reciprocated. I mean, obviously we've been in business together now for more years than I care to remember. It has to be said. So you know, it's symbiotic. You know, it's like, you know, producers send me samples to review, not just to do episodes of the show with, but to actually purchase. And in this case, I did indeed purchase these little miniature packs because I thought they were just really interesting. The mother cask was damn good, it has to be said. I mean, that was a lovely Pulteney, and I would have been quite happy just to have had a bottle of that as it was. Yeah, we didn't really need to muck about with it, to be bluntly honest with you. The rum Octave, the most successful in my personal opinion of all of the Octaves. I thought the balance was really very good, and it just added that sort of additional dried fruit kind of dimension, and I thought, you know, that really was very impressive. The Ryoka Octave, I mean, again, and I suppose you could say the same for the two sherry Octaves as well, is that they were very intense. You know, they left you in no doubt as to what they were, but none of the three Octave finishes had the balance of the rum Octave. I mean, this was just pretty much all about the Ryoka cask. And to a certain extent so was the Oloroso, although intriguingly less about the Oloroso sherry and more about the sort of like the intensity of the European oak. And if A.D Rattray turned around and said, well, it wasn't European oak, I'm going to live on a desert island because I obviously don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But that to me was all about the European oak rather than the Oloroso. Whereas the PX, on the other hand, was all about the PX sherry and less about the wood character, which I thought was really intriguing. And this was just the wonderful thing about whiskey and about this little Octave set, was how the interaction of the spirit and the different casks and how what was the end result really intriguing. So if you're I mean, unfortunately I've got none of these sets left now, but I'm pretty certain A.D Rattray probably have, and I think you can buy them directly from their website. So you know, if you want to sort of like get hold of one of these little sets, which I really suggest that you do because they are just really intriguing, then go for it. That's brilliant. As for today's episode of the show, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I do apologise if I'm a bit snotty and a bit sort of bunged up and what have you, but like I said, I think I soldiered on like a brave little soldier, shall we say. So anyway, until next week, good afternoon and good dramming.